tātou e o whualofa, whaatalofa atu le mamalo tātou atunuu, I o lo whaapeon whaafonfonga mai le so se tāwhar ke lope le nea o uli, ma lol soifua. Ia, o e o lo whaalongolongo mai Samoa, I nei New Zealand ma Aotearoa, ia whaapea nei whaapea fo I so se vaenga lalangi mo mai nei whaasalaunga. Ia, e o whualofa whaatalofa atu ia te utou uma, ia lea o uli o le nea so wharaile. Ia, ele I whatanu ina sa tātou pol kalame mo le au talavou I le vai aso na se ima vai atu nei, ia ono le whaamanatu ina o le maliu o le tātou li whaola. Ia, e whaaftai le alo whao le tātou tamalalangi. Ia, o tātou te tau nuu mai ei fo I le whai ungo le nei vai aso. Tātou nuu o lo tu ua fo ia o onga le whanau. Ma lo lawa le whaamalosi. Ia, o ma whaatasi ai ma le tamaitai ia Lynonah Tausa. Ia, o lo whaapea ona awai mai lungo le Zoom I le nea o uli. Mai Christchurch, o le nona o se tasi o lo o whainga luenga nei I le Tupai Pacific Public Sector I lalo o lato internship program. Ta alofa lava Lynonah, thank you for joining our youth program this afternoon. I am honored to be speaking with you. How are you today?
Thank you so much for the warm introduction. It's honestly my pleasure to be here today and to be interviewed by you. I'm doing very well, and yeah, I look forward to our talanoa today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you share with us your personal journey growing up and why you chose the career path that you have today in regards to your being employed under the Tupai Pacific Public Sector? Whaamulmoli.
Yeah, of course. My journey began in Samoa. So I was born there. We moved here to Aotearoa with my family so that not only my mom could pursue her studies, but also so that we could build a better future together. And I guess that experience of migration and transition really shaped who I am today, navigating between two worlds, holding on to my Samoan identity, while also adapting to life here in Aotearoa, especially living in Christchurch, which is well known and known to be a predominantly Palangi city. So finding my community and my cultural grounding has been really important for me. And in terms of why I am leaning towards policy is that I am really passionate about civic representation in spaces where influential decisions are made. So there's a saying that my mom always used to say to me, and that is, if we're not at the decision-making table, we're on the menu. So it's really important to me that we have real Pacific voices in these platforms and that they reflect authentic Pacific experiences and our unique challenges that we face as well.
Thank you so much. What inspired you to become an advocate for the youth and climate justice for our Pacific people?
I would say the biggest reason as to why I wanted to be an advocate was actually going home and going to my villages in Savaii, especially on the coastlines. You know, they're already steadily eroding, forcing families to move inland.
Yeah.
And our homes are not just physical spaces, but they are where our loved ones are laid to rest, where our stories live, and where our identity is rooted. So losing them means also losing a part of who we are, so our culture, our history, and our ancestral connections. So this is why the role of youth is also so critical, in my opinion, is because we carry both the responsibility and the opportunity to drive solutions. So blending adaptation strategies with Indigenous knowledge to protect our lands and ways of life. And at the same time, we are very powerful advocates to ensure that our voices are heard and that future generations will still have a place to call home after us as well. So that would be my biggest reason.
Mahalo lava. Speaking of, since you are employed under Tuputai, how did you hear about the Tuputai Pacific Sector Internship Program? And can you share a little about the internship program and what it offers for Pacific students who may be interested in this career, in a career in the public sector?
Yeah, of course. I first heard about the Tupai internship through my university networks and also through conversations with peers and mentors who encouraged me to apply. And through the program, I was placed at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, where I worked in the gas and fuel policy team within the energy markets branch. And through that internship, it gave me hands-on experience in public policy, allowing me to contribute to real work that shapes Aotearoa's energy sector while also developing my own skills in research, my skills in analysis, and in policy writing, because it's very different from when you are writing in university and then when you're moving into the public sector. It's completely different, theory and practical. Being in theory and being in practice is very different. So yeah, that's what it offers. It offers students a unique opportunity to gain insight into how government operates, to build professional networks, and most importantly, bringing a Pacific perspective into decision-making spaces. So the program really looks for students who are passionate about serving Pacific communities. You don't necessarily have to be studying politics or take anything like that. They To be eligible, you just need to be of Pacific descent in your second to last or final year of tertiary study or a recent graduate and have completed at least 1 year of study to be eligible to work in Aotearoa and be available full time over the summer for the internship too.
Thank you so much. So those are one of the entry requirements for Tuputai, am I correct? That you have explained earlier?
Uh, oh yeah, so just to be of Pacific descent and be in your second to last year, your final year, or be a graduate. Yeah.
Thank you. So working at Tuputai, how do you wish to contribute to the improved wellness of your Pacific community being there? And what do you do at Tuputai to contribute to this?
I aim to contribute to the improved wellness of our Pacific communities by ensuring that, again, Pacific voices are meaningfully represented in public policy. This means bringing our lived experiences, our cultural values, our collective ways of knowing into these spaces so that policies are not only effective but reflect the realities of our people. During my placement, I was always trying to apply a Pacific lens to research, to analysis, and when certain problems came up during my time at MB, I would reflect on how would this impact the Pacific community, who benefits from it, that kind of thing. So just centering our communities in those conversations, and in doing so, like I feel like that role helped bridge the gap between government and Pacific communities, ensuring that our voices are not just heard, but are, I guess, co-designing these policies that will eventually shape our futures.
Thank you. So you are currently doing your master's in international relations and diplomacy at the Canterbury University. Can you share your academic journey and your academic experience in this course so far? And what is the aim of your course, and what do you hope to do with the knowledge attained from your studies?
Yeah, absolutely. My journey so far has been both challenging but also deeply rewarding. The course has strengthened my understanding of global politics, of diplomacy, and the complex systems that shape international decision making, while also allowing me to critically engage with issues that directly impact the Pacific, so such as climate change, issues with development, and geopolitical um, tensions and dynamics currently in the works in the Pacific. The aim of my studies is not only to build, my own personal strong analytical and policy skills, but to really understand how to navigate and influence international spaces effectively. Ultimately, I hope to use the knowledge and experience gained from this degree to serve the Pacific beyond just a national level, increasing that and advocating for our communities on global stages to contribute to international policy discussions and ensuring that Pacific voices, perspectives, and priorities are represented in decisions that affect our region and our future. So yeah, that's how it's going so far. But yeah.
Thank you. That's wonderful. You attended the 2026 Pacific Stakeholder Forum in March as part of the youth panel discussions. Can you share with us some of the core issues that were discussed?
Yeah, of course. I was, yeah, as you mentioned, a part of the youth panel and alongside three other amazing youth leaders. And there were there were some major themes that we discussed, one of them being differences in lived experience between Pacific youth and older generations. So recognizing that young people today are navigating new challenges that are often shaped by technology, identity, and the changing social context of today. And we also touched on the use of AI and digital innovation, where there was excitement about the opportunities that it creates for access, creativity, and development, but also an awareness of its limitations and the need to ensure it is used responsibly and equitably. Another strong focus that we touched on was ensuring that youth were co designing and creating meaningful partnerships with the government. So, emphasizing that young people should not just be consulted, but actively involved in every stage in shaping policies that will affect them. So, this led to important conversations also about the sustainability of youth leadership. So, will we be moving beyond tokenistic engagement towards creating genuine long term spaces where youth can influence decision making? So overall, the formal really reinforced the need to create environments where Pacific youth are empowered to co-design solutions, to have their voices heard, and to play a really central role in shaping policies and outcomes for the communities. And as we know already, the Pacific youth are making are growing in population within Aotearoa, so ensuring that these policies will ultimately benefit them in the future.
Wonderful. Those are some very insightful and interesting topics. Speaking of technology and AI, what is your opinion on the growing influence of AI amongst our Pacific and our Samoan Tupulaga Talavo?
In my view, the growing influence of AI among our Pacific and Samoan Tupulanga is something that carries both opportunity and risk. Like anything, it has its good and its challenges too. So, on one hand, we have AI can be a powerful tool for our young people. It can support education, improve access to information, enhance creativity, and open up new pathways for innovation, especially for those who may face barriers to traditional opportunities or to traditional careers. And for many Pacific youth, it can also be a way to amplify our voices, to share our stories, and engage more confidently in global spaces. But at the same time, there are important concerns to consider. There is a risk of over reliance where critical thinking and cultural knowledge may be sidelined if AI is used without reflection or intention. There are also issues around equity, ensuring that all Pacific communities have fair access to these technologies, and the need to protect our data sovereignty, to protect our intellectual property, our knowledge, and our identities from being misused by AI. So, and I think another area that often gets really overlooked is the major environmental impact that AI actually has. The systems that power AI require significant energy and resources that contribute to carbon emissions and environmental strain. So, for Pacific communities who are already on the front lines of climate change and already facing the impacts of climate change, this raises important questions about sustainability and responsibility. It highlights the need to balance both innovation with environmental stewardship, which is deeply aligned with our Pacific values of how we care for our environment. So, overall, I do believe that AI has the potential to be a positive force for our tupulanga, but only if it is used intentionally, only if it is grounded in our values, if it's guided by our communities and approached with awareness of both its benefits and the consequences that it may have as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As a passionate youth advocate for Samoa, what can you say about our Samoan youth growing up and living away from home who are struggling to find their purpose and identity because of certain barriers such as European influences, cultural barriers, language barriers, and etc.?
I would say that even in that struggle of trying to fit into systems that weren't built for us and trying to work in a language that is not our mother tongue, um, many young people are still finding their ways to reconnect, whether that's through church, through cultural groups, Pacific events such as like Polyfest, sports teams, or even small gatherings at home. These spaces become really important because they bring back that sense of home where you don't have to explain who you are, you just are at home. And for a lot of us, home isn't just a physical space like Samoa, but something that we carry and that we can rebuild in different spaces. So it might be in the way we speak with our parents, how we sing in church, what foods we eat and cook at home, or how we interact with other Pacific young people who just understand your experience without needing to explain. So even though there are barriers, as you mentioned, that can make identity feel confusing at times, our youth are always adapting and finding their ways back to themselves. And often it's in those small, familiar spaces of community and culture that help bring everything back together and help remind them what home is and ensures that they're never really truly disconnected from who they are. So yeah, basically building a home away from home.
Thank you. Building a home away from home. As an advocate for climate justice, what are some of the ways you and your fellow colleagues who are on the same path advocating for this issue here in New Zealand and around the Pacific in general?
I'd say that as an advocate, I've been involved in consultations with young people and communities, including work with the World Food Farm on sustainable agri-food systems, where I've contributed to Pacific perspectives on food security, sustainability, and the importance of Indigenous knowledge in shaping resilient systems. I've also spoken on platforms like, as you mentioned earlier, the stakeholder funnel and through opportunities like this as well, this interview to help bring Pacific voices into wider decision-making spaces, but also to educate and to make aware of these issues to our Pacific people who might not know what's going on um, at the moment. So for me, advocacy isn't just about big stages or formal events. Advocacy can start much closer to home. It can be in the classroom where you challenge ideas or you ask questions. You make space for Pacific perspectives that are often left out. It can be within your family through conversations that help reconnect people to culture, language, and values. It can be having debates after local. Even those everyday discussions are already powerful forms of advocacy. And
Yes.
in academia as well, for anybody that's studying, that's another space where you can advocate, where you can question dominant narratives around climate change and bring forward Indigenous and Pacific ways of understanding the relationship between people, land, and ocean. So for me, it's all connected. Advocacy is not just one moment in time, but it's something that lives in our everyday spaces. So yeah.
Thank you. That's very important. Haftai. Um, what is your opinion on the world crisis that we are currently in right now, with high costs of living, the rise in petrol prices, pollution, and things of the sort? What are some long-term effects of this ongoing war on our lands and our islands and our governments with regards to climate change in years to come?
Oh, that's a tough question. But these issues there and the conflict at the moment is disrupting global supply chains. It's as you mentioned, driving up fuel costs and making essential goods more expensive, which disproportionately affects small island nations like Samoa that rely heavily on imports. So in the long term, these pressures could lead to greater economic inequality. It
Mm,
could lead to increased migration as people will look to seek better opportunities. Because as I mentioned before, we rely heavily on imports for something, so that will drive our economy
yes.
very, very high. And the growing strain on government resources that are increasingly directed toward disaster recovery rather than development of our islands.
Mm,
So for Pacific Islands, especially around climate change, it will intensify greatly. So these challenges, like sea level rising, coastal erosion, extreme weather events, they will become more intense and probably more frequent. This will severely impact and threaten our homes, our food systems, and our cultural ways of life.
mm,
Ongoing global conflict also risks reducing international cooperation on climate action, which
yes.
is a really, really detrimental issue for the Pacific because we kind of rely on these international corporations so that they can help us and they can leverage us, considering we don't contribute as much as the greater superpower nations do to climate change. So they could also increase geopolitical tensions in the Pacific region as well. So overall, these crises will reinforce each other, meaning that their combined impact will likely be more severe over time, especially for vulnerable island communities already on the front lines of climate and economic instability.
Thank you. Yes, I know it's really sad, and especially that our Pacific Islands are suffering the consequences of the actions of these big island nations when we are not, in fact, responsible. But thank you for that. Um, you represented the Pacific region at the World Food Forum in Rome as a Youth Policy Board member in 2025. So congratulations on that. I know it's in 2025, but can you share with us the purpose of this trip and what you aimed to deliver in this conference?
Yeah, the trip was so crazy. Like it was my first ever really international conference to
Mm,
attend. So I was like, I need to go in there with a bang. So my whole purpose of attending this trip was to ensure that people knew that the Pacific was at this World Food Farm. So ensuring that our voices were included in every conversation that I entered, um, and to bring forward the realities that Pacific communities are facing,
mm,
particularly around food security, climate change, and just the pressures on small island agri-food systems. It was honestly crazy going there and realizing how many people did not know that Samoa was a country. So that was a little bit concerning. But just, going into these international spaces and ensuring that people know that the Pacific is there and we're here to make change and we're here to make a stand on everything that's going on and that's negatively putting us in um, these unjust positions. So at the conference, I really focused on advocating for greater recognition of Indigenous and Pacific knowledge systems for in shaping sustainable agri-food policies and highlighting the need for solutions that are locally grounded rather than a one-size-fits-all global approaches that are often imposed to us in the Pacific. So
thank
yeah, I just wanted to ensure that youth are not just included as participants, but as decision shapers in these spaces and um, just to ensure that the Pacific is not spoken about, that we're not spoken about, but
you.
we are spoken with, and that our lived experiences are reflected in the policies and decisions that will shape the future of global food systems.
Thank you. Amen to that. Um, what can you say while you were at World Food Forum? What can you say is the collective role of Pacific youth in agricultural policy and sustainable food systems?
Pacific youth play a very powerful role in shaping agricultural policy and sustainable food systems, because we're not only responding to the present challenges, but we're also carrying forward our food heritage into the future. So one of the key realities we face is, for example, the digital divide. As food systems become more data-driven and tech-focused, many Pacific communities, we still have very limited access to digital infrastructure, tools, and training. And if this is not addressed, there is a real risk that rural and island voices will be excluded from decision-making spaces that are becoming more and more increasingly shaped online. And at the same time, Pacific youth are in a unique position to bridge this gap by connecting digital innovation with indigenous knowledge systems. So, our food heritage, the ways our ancestors planted, the ways we fished, preserved, and shared food, is deeply rooted in relationships between land, ocean, and people. So, it's knowledge that has been built on observation, respect, sustainability, and passed down generations, that as youth, we need to carry this food heritage forward by not just preserving it, but by adapting it to today's world. This
Yes.
means using tech where it is useful, but also ensuring that it doesn't replace or override Indigenous ways of knowing. Instead, using both to work together to strengthen resilience and food securities in our communities that work within our local contexts. So, in many ways, Pacific youth are custodians of the past and builders of the future. So, carrying this food heritage with them, closing the divide, and shaping sustainable food systems that will always remain rooted in our culture and identity and our values that we carry that already care for our environment.
Whaftai lava. In regards to climate change and climate justice, what are some highlights from the forum about regional representation, particularly for the Global South and Small Islands Developing States, to address climate change and food security for the Pacific?
There was a clear recognition that those who are most affected by climate change, including Pacific Islands, are often the least represented in global decision-making spaces. A major highlight was the push to center lived experience in climate and food security discussions. So rather than treating the global South as and the Pacific Islands as passive recipients of aid or policy, there was growing acknowledgement that our regions actually hold practical solutions, particularly through indigenous knowledge systems, small scale agriculture, and community led food practices that are already climate resilient and that are already sustainable. So, for small island developing states specifically, there was important visibility around the interconnectedness of climate change and food security. Issues like saltwater intrusion, soil degradation, and disrupted fisheries were discussed not just as environmental problems, but as direct threats to livelihoods, to our culture, and to our nation's sovereignty. So, another key takeaway was the emphasis on youth and Indigenous voices being included, not just in consultation phases, but as I mentioned earlier, being co designed with the youth in government spaces. So there's a growing understanding that representation needs to move beyond symbolism into real decision making power. So overall, the forum really highlighted that addressing climate change and food security requires equitable regional representation. It requires stronger inclusion of the global South and genuine respect and understanding for Indigenous and Pacific ways of knowing and doing things.
Thank you. And thank you again, Lynonah, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us this afternoon. My last question for you: what is your challenge for our youth and our viewers about youth empowerment and the significance of working together for climate change and climate justice? And what do you hope for in generations to come?
I think my challenge to our youth and to anyone listening is to not wait. Don't wait to be ready or in a position of power to start making change. Youth empowerment often begins in spaces that you are already in your home, in your classroom, in your church, in your friendships, in your everyday conversation. That is where real influence starts. So don't wait to be ready. You can start the change right now. And we often think change only happens on big platforms, but collective action is built through small, consistent steps. When we speak up for what is right, when we uplift Indigenous knowledge, when we support each other instead of working in isolation, that is already climate justice in action. The challenges we are facing, especially with climate change, they're too big for individual effort. That's why working together is so important, whether that be across your villages, whether that be across specific nations, and even across generations. We need unity, we need shared responsibility, and genuine collaboration to create lasting change. What I truly hope for is for future generations is very simple but powerful, and that is that they will inherit not just a more sustainable world, but a more just one. A world where Pacific voices are not only heard but valued, where our environment is protected, where our cultures, our languages, and our identities will continue to thrive and won't be left behind if climate change takes our islands. I hope they grow up knowing that they belong and that their voices do matter in national and regional and international stages, and that anyone is more than capable of shaping a future that is fair, that is resilient, and that is rooted in care for both the people and the planet. So that's what I hope for in the future.
Thank you so much, Lynonah, for your words of wisdom and your words of encouragement, not only for the youth, but for myself as well, and our staff here at Samoa Capital Radio. Thank you again for accepting the invitation to be a part of our program this afternoon. Whaafitai lava mo lo taimi, ia mal whaavanoa ina o lo waso mo lo tatou por kalame ni nea o uli. Moli atu fo il whaafitai I tatou leo lo mai mo mai ma malo la tunu o lo whafongfonga mai mo mai le nei whaasalong tu sao e sir tā ua o le climate change ma le climate justice I le taimin nei e tono tatou I le lalolangi ia e mai se mo Pasifika o lo o awhia tele I consequences o me o lo tutupu mai ia tatou tinga lue whaatasi e ina ia se suinga mo tatou whanau ia ma le lumanai o tatou atunuu a inga me kalesia ia o le taimi fo I lava le vai aso fou le aso wharaile I le tolu I le wha I le awauli le atu e whaatautai ai ia le sia tatou pul kalame mo le tupulanga talavou a mo le taimi nei ia manuia tele whaasausaunga le nei fiafi so I fua ma ia manuia.